All right, guys, so the last part of reading for today. I want to go back to this mid-unit assessment. You don't have this yet. Remember, you're going to be doing this tomorrow on Tuesday. The second part of this, because remember, you're going to be writing a paragraph about what inspired Jack. So the second criteria says it clearly states a focus about what inspired Jack, and it stays focused throughout the entire piece. So with that model paragraph that you guys have right here that you just marked up, it talks about Jack's poetry throughout the whole entire piece. It doesn't talk about Jack's poetry and then what Jack ate for dinner and then what Jack's doing this weekend. It talks only about Jack's poetry. That's what they mean about staying focused throughout the whole entire piece. So you tomorrow will be writing a paragraph for that assessment, but today you're going to actually write your first sentence, that focus statement for your paragraph that you're going to write tomorrow. Vocabulary is changing a little bit for us teachers when using this program. So what you might hear me calling it at some points is an introductory sentence, but I will try and switch myself over to a focus statement. But I want you guys to start using that focus statement, because the more you use it, the more I will use it. So on Friday, we filled up these pages. What inspires poets to write poetry? You have almost a front and back full page of what has inspired Jack's poetry by looking at several of his different poems that he's written and why he wrote those. What was his inspiration for those? So writers, they put an introductory or a focus statement in the introduction, the beginning part of their writing, because they want to introduce the reader, you, to what you're going to be reading about. Think about any book you've ever read, or even back when you were still reading like nursery rhymes and things like that, or tall tales, Once Upon a Time, and A Land Far Away. Think of things like that. They're setting that scene. They're giving you the focus of what you're going to be reading about. And that's the kind of writers that we're going to become this year in 4th grade. There's one of my cats. That's Penelope. So I want you to begin to think about what has inspired you in life and what you think you might want some of your poetry to be like, because remember, you're going to be making your own poem. You're going to be presenting it to your classmates, Miss Hewley's class, myself, Miss Hewley, and our special guests, your family members, your parents, whomever can come into school. And then we'll also be traveling to visit my mom and the residents at Silver Birch to share our poems with them. So I'm super excited about that, and I know you guys have been pretty excited about writing your own poetry. And I might even try as well. I'm not very good at it, but I'll try for you guys. So let's start thinking about what inspires us. Because you'll be writing about what inspires you, even today still. So we're gonna go back to this model informative paragraph, and right here I've rewritten that model sentence. I don't need you to rewrite it. I rewrote it so you guys can see. And Love That Dog by Sharon Creech. Even though he doesn't understand poetry at first, the main character, Jack, is inspired to write poetry. So think about that. How could you write that focus sentence in a different way? That's not how I would write a focus sentence or focus statement ever. I think it's a very strongly written focus statement, but that's not how I would write it. I might say, and Love That Dog by Sharon Creech, Jack didn't like or understand poetry in the beginning, but by the end, he loved poetry and was inspired to write his own. So that's another way you could put it. There's several different ways you could write about Jack and how his love for poetry changed. Because remember at the beginning, Jack was saying, can't do it, brain's empty, poetry's for girls. And then at the very end, today we found out Walter Dean Myers the man that really inspired Jack to write poetry, came and visited his school, and that is pretty stinking awesome. So, for tomorrow's assessment, remember you're writing that paragraph, and we're going to work on that focus statement, that introductory statement today. You can write about one of two things. First, you can write about how Jack was inspired by his dog Sky, and how most of his poetry was about Sky. And we were actually introduced to Sky very early on in the book. We just didn't know it yet when Jack wrote his first Blue Car poem. He was trying to tell us about Sky, but I think he was maybe a little too scared or a little too nervous to tell us about Sky fully. Or you can write about how Jack was inspired by from other poets. And if you go back to that note catcher at the beginning that we filled out on Friday, this is going to help you a lot for that mid-unit assessment tomorrow, because it gives us here what inspired the poet. So in that column, you're either going to have Sky, his dog, or you're going to have specific poems that we read. I know one that we saw a lot of was the Red Wheelbarrow, the Tiger, the Dog poem, Apple. So there were lots of famous poems that we read that inspired Jack, but we also know that Love That Dog was mainly because of Jack's dog, Sky. So if you go back into the book, there's tons of different things that are going to help you figure out what was Jack's inspiration. So today, like how I wrote, going back to this focus statement, I rewrote that focus statement of Sharon Creech's here, or whomever wrote this paragraph for that. Sharon Creech didn't write that, I'm sorry. But whoever wrote this paragraph, that focus statement, I rewrote it down here. I want you to write your own focus statement for tomorrow. So think about what you're going to write about. Are you going to either write about how Jack's poetry was inspired by his dog Sky, or how Jack's poetry was inspired by other poets? So his poetry was either inspired by Sky, or his poetry was inspired by other poets. And you're going to write a focus statement, just like this, underneath, but for one of those topics. Which paragraph are you going to write tomorrow? Jack was inspired by Sky, or Jack was inspired by other poets? You take that time now. Jack was inspired by Sky, or Jack was inspired by other poets, and write a focus statement here on your paper for me to see tomorrow. Which one you're writing, and then write a very strong focus statement for that. You've got an example here. Mrs. Barber rewrote it. I read one to you. If you need to go back and re-listen to what I said, you can. But remember, it's not going to be this focus statement. It's going to be your own focus statement. You're either going to focus on Jack was inspired by his dog Sky to write poetry, or Jack was inspired by other poets to write poetry. And you're going to make your focus statement based on that. And then we will go over this tomorrow. I will check them in the morning. And then you will have in the September 9th folder, there is a doc there that you will see, and it is called inspiration. And so I want you to think about inspiration. What inspires you? And so I shared that one of my things that inspires me is my puppy Cooper, who is being very loud right now with his new toys. Another thing that inspires me is teaching and all of you guys. So I'm going to type one of those things up, and then I'm going to write Mrs. Barber afterwards, so everybody knows that it's me. And everybody's going to type on the same document, so you'll see everybody else's writing. Make sure you write your name with it, because that is going to start generating some ideas about what you could possibly write poetry about. After you do that, you have to do your focus statement underneath the model paragraph. You have to write your own focus statement. Then you have to go into the inspiration doc and write what inspires you. And then you need to go into your independent reading of poetry. So grab your poetry book, read for about 10-15 minutes, how much time you got left, and make sure you make a post. I am going to grade this post, so make sure it's dated today, 9-9-19, and answer one of your prompts. Make sure you're adding that title. If there's no page numbers, don't worry about the page numbers. If there's no specific title, don't worry about that. But there is a title to the book. There is an author to the book. It's good practice to get into that because that is strong writing. That's what we're learning about right now. That is the focus statement of your reading notebook. So keep practicing that. That is what's going to make you a strong writer. After that, shortly, I assume you're going to be getting your math homework, and you can be working on that. If you have any other things that you need to finish up from today, please go ahead and work on that. Please make sure the floor is picked up today, your area is cleaned up, and you are ready to go home. I hope you guys have a great night. I will see you first thing in the morning. Bye.